Welcome to Align Your Practice, an exploration of the seamless relationship between the business of chiropractic and the future of natural health care. Join us as we engage with an array of talent, from seasoned experts to passionate new entrepreneurs. Now, here's your host, Dr. Joe Esposito.
All right, welcome to the Align Your Practice podcast. As your host, Dr. Joe Esposito. I'm excited today to have Dr. Bryne Willey on the call. How are you doing, Doc?
Fantastic, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. I was able to actually spend some time with you and the kids last week. Went to visit Bryne's new practice, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. How to go from your starter practice to your dream practice. So I was itching to see this mastermind build out of this enterprise level practice. So let's dive in, Doc. I think it'd be fun to start on the starter practice. Like, you getting out of school, maybe you didn't have a construction background or a finance background, didn't know anything about opening a practice or financing or building one, but
or being a chiropractor.
Yeah. Yeah, trying to figure out how to adjust some bones really is the biggest fear, right?
Exactly.
So tell me how it felt. Like, go back to that if you can. Like, take yourself back and let's go to the starter practice. We have people on this call that are students that are like, how do you start a practice? I've never ran a business. I've never had a job, some of them. So it's daunting to even think about starting a practice. But let's take you back there and use the AlignLife system. So there was definitely some leverage and guidance in there. But guide us through a little bit about the experience.
Yeah, I didn't even want to start a practice, man. I was out of school and I just wanted to see patients. I just wanted to get to be a doctor. And I had a job lined up. I was getting ready to graduate in like 2 months. And then all of a sudden the doc pulled the plug at the last second, pulled the offer. And I was reeling. I'm just handing out resumes to every doctor in town, and got a chance to interview at your practice in Peoria, and met the guy that ended up starting with practice right out of school. So it worked out perfectly, but boy, it was a stressful couple months. And I got to be an associate in the AlignLife system for 1.5 years. And that way I didn't have to figure it out on my own. I got to just learn, how to be a doctor really, and not even try to learn how to open a practice. And then it didn't take long before those entrepreneurial instincts kicked in, and realized that I wanted to have my own practice in my own hometown. So
were you not planning on opening, or just not right away, or did you not know?
Honestly, man, in my brain, I had my mind made up that I was going to be associate forever. I was going to be just, show up, see patients, and be a doctor, and never even considered that as an option in the short term, maybe in the long term, but years and years, maybe a decade, down the road. Because, I didn't know what I didn't know, and trying to figure out, how, the idea of running a practice on top of being a doctor and building a practice was like two separate worlds for me, but it came close, and they tied in very closely, very quickly. Just in the 1.5 years I spent as an associate with that doc, but also learning the systems and realizing how simplified, AlignLife makes it to be able to make that transition. And then it became crystal clear that was a possibility.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I appreciate that conversation, because I think it's like a rite of passage when you get out of school. Everyone has to open a practice, and it's not true. A lot of docs want to be a doctor. And I think we have to edify the practitioner, that there are amazing practitioners out there that do great work, that can have a great career and not have to go through this daunting experience of opening and running a business, because that may not be what they want to do, right? I mean, it's okay to be a doctor. It's an awesome profession.
It absolutely is. And even having that on-ramp to know that that's a possibility. Like, I can remember being in school and looking around and thinking, well, they've got it set because their doc's or their dad's a chiropractor, or their uncle is, and they have a place and a transition and a legacy to step right into. And if I didn't have that personally, it was like, well, you just got to find a job, brother. You just got to find a way to be able to be a doctor. The idea of being able to do that on my own was something that just seemed not only terrifying, but almost impossible, right out of the gates, let alone 1.5 years after graduating.
Yeah, when I look at your, we talk a lot on the podcast about profiling, behavioral assessments, like the PDP profile. And if I remember correctly, I think you were one high extroversion and low pace patients and low compliance. Is that correct or no?
And low dominance. It was I'm high pace patients, low compliance, and low dominance. Yeah, it's a weird dynamic to be a person opening and running a practice.
So, but using the AlignLife system, like I remember when we helped you secure that practice. I remember we negotiated a great deal, saved you a lot of money, got you into practice. And I think it was kind of hard to follow the systems due to your behavioral profile, but you did. You stayed in the game, you did. And I think it's when you got a manager that offset your weaknesses and built on your strengths. Is that really what happened? Because you really grew to a great successful business. But I see people at low compliance, and it makes me nervous to come into the organization because it's a systems-based process. So talk me through that. Was it innately a struggle with systems, and was it staffing, or give me your thoughts?
It wasn't linear. I'll tell you that, man. Like, it would get to a point of growth, and then it would level out. And that level out stage was where I was holding too tight, where I was trying to do it my way, when I was trying to control everything and have my influence and finger on everything. And those periods of growth, when I look back, it was either I drove back into training, or I added a team member, or we utilized, leveraged some sort of, technology that AlignLife, did something like that made me get out of my own way, and then start to trust and hand those pieces over to different either team members or people on the corporate team at AlignLife. But it's like those, you probably remember this in practice too, like those periods of growth where you're like, I've got this figured out and I have it mastered. But then the problem is, once you have that mastered, you just have that space mastered. Maybe your team doesn't have that mastered. And I can remember, like, for trainings, like, we would do AlignLife trainings like every single week. And, I would be on the trainings like every single week for like the first year and a half or 2 years. And then in my brain, it's like, well, I know the scripts, I know this training, so why do I need to be on this? And I would pull back and pull my team back too. And what I realized is, even if I'm fluent in this stuff, my team still needs to be a part of this. And we have to create a culture where it's a practice, mindset, where literally you show up and you go practice to refine your craft, not just you and not just you and not just you, but all of us together. And like you said, the biggest level up for our practice was bringing on Stacy, who's our office manager and who's training to be our COO now. She completely leveled up our practice, because then I got to pull myself away from tasks like, training the team and running the team. That got to be her, brainchild. And then I got to set, more focus on vision and being able to, plan and prepare and have a vision for what the next step is, as opposed to just trying to grow. And that was my mindset for 5-6 years. And it would just grow with brute force and pain and struggle and a lot of scar tissue.
So if we go through those cycles, like, and we hear this a lot at the Remarkable Practice, that launch, build, scale, exit, flow, right? So we talked a little about the launch, it being where, you had the guidance, you got into practice. And I mentioned a little about the systems being a little bit harder, but you did follow them. Let's stop there for a second. Was it because you're just a competitive person, you like to win, because you're an athlete, you were into sports?
Yeah.
Is it that because I'm not a CIST compliant person on my profile, and it takes me having to really want to make impact, or I had some mindset in order to be like really laser focused on a system, and I can do it. It just takes me more energy than somebody else that's a high compliant person. How did you navigate that? Was it your mindset?
Yeah, launch was simple and launch was short, because I mentioned how I was an associate for a year and a half before I opened this practice in Springfield. And so I was living an hour away from that practice. And so if I was going to build my own, practice as a, associate IC, I had to go find those patients. So I was already in those rhythms of, you're doing this screening, you're doing this health fair, you're doing this farmer's market, and then that mindset. And in the beginning, I just said yes to everything. I would literally go anywhere with a table, a chair, just to talk and to try and launch, this practice. And I'd done it, the year and a half prior. So it was basically repeating it and doing it the same thing in my own backyard, where I had relationships and connections and, opportunities to do that. So I was already, still in that mindset anyway. It was just a matter of doing it again. And I'd already, had the wherewithal or the reps in one place to be able to repeat it again. I wasn't afraid of that part. It was the build. I spent so much time in build, just because I thought I could and should and had to do it on my own.
Would you recommend that to a student that's listening right now? Like, if they're interested in AlignLife, would you recommend them, maybe spending some time or working a year inside of an existing clinic, what would be your advice?
Yeah, I think that would be a brilliant idea. I guess it depends on the person, but if you're at all hesitant about opening your own practice and running your own practice and building a team, yes. The answer to that question I would say is yes. Because then you're learning those systems brand new and fresh. You're learning them as a doctor, and you get to live in that doctor space so that when you start to branch out into build and scale and build your team out, you've already got a fluency in a lot of the conversations and a lot of the flow, of what that, practice and vision and building looks like. So yeah, absolutely. But, at the same time, if somebody on this call is like, I am a high C, high D, high extroversion, high dominance person, and I want to go out and start my practice now, AlignLife still has the tools to make you successful. It's just, what you see for yourself and your vision. Sure.
So you said launch was easy because you had the experience. That makes sense. And then you spent.
Let me rephrase. It wasn't easy. It was short. It wasn't easy, but I was in that for a short period of time.
We always say, well, we won't make it easy. We just make it easier, but it's not. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's all.
Simple and easy aren't the same thing. Yeah.
So you went into build and you scaled pretty well. What was the harder part, build or scale? Like between those two?
Build for sure, because I was stuck in my own way, and ego gets in the way of us. Especially when you start winning, especially when you start seeing those patient stories and seeing those changes and start to have a patient that stays around for 6 months and then they stick around for a year. You start to think it's all you. It's the me show, and I'm doing all of this, and it's easy to do that because you're wearing all the hats. Like you're wearing the doctor hat, you're wearing the business owner hat, you're wearing the trainer hat, you're wearing the accountant hat, all of those things. But then there gets to a point where when you keep doing that and the practice keeps growing and it keeps building, eventually it caps out at what your level of what your glass ceiling is in terms of being able to grow and continue to grow in that manner. And it can't, at least for me, I cannot reach my vision by myself. And when I had that unlock moment of saying like, I'm literally going to burn out, I'm going to lose my passion for what I do, the practice is going to start to contract and suffer because of it. Or just on a personal aspect, I know we're talking a lot about practice in business right now, but having the freedom and ability to be present dad and husband was something that I was starting to see that as well. The practice was pulling me away from that space, and there was not alignment between those two things. The more that the practice built, and if something was going to change, the disease of me had to go away, and I had to be able to embrace building a team that's really good at helping me try to reach my vision, accomplish my goals.
So the transition into scale is interesting to me because it's scary because you're giving up some control to management. You're giving up control to another doctor that's seeing patients. It's a mindset change, and it's something that a lot of doctors don't experience. So I always say, if you're going to invest the time to do launch, please spend the time to learn how to scale, because we're going to build a practice whether we're an employer or an owner. But if you're an owner, the value of being an owner is the scale, is because you can now leverage time. You could leverage a team. You could leverage dollars. You could leverage, and you could spend maybe a little more time with your family, a little more time with your social activities, a little more time just have some peace of mind because of the risks, the investments, the time you put in to launch this business. And it breaks my heart that many chiropractors just stay and build their entire career, and then at the end of the career, they just close their doors. And it's like they missed scale and they missed their exit. And it's like, that breaks my heart for the work that a chiropractor puts into build. So,
and for the profession, yeah.
And for the profession, you don't leave that legacy for the next doctor. So that's even a bigger point, is we should be thinking legacy.
We become the bottleneck, Joe. And if you get stuck in build, you get stuck in scale. Like as doctors, we become the bottleneck to that next step of growth. And so much of what I'm talking about is from my own personal mindset. But that same thing is true for the profession. That same thing is true for our patients. Like when we're not willing to be willing to grow or be willing to hand off and, like you said, delegate and leverage other team members and let them be awesome and be a part of that growth. There's going to be bottlenecks, and you're not going to serve and you're not going to accomplish what's possible for you. And most people, if it's students, and people in launch and build right now, most people don't realize what's possible for them. And your idea of what you think you can accomplish is not even close to, what you truly can. And it has to do with identifying your ability to become less. I must become less, and the team and the practice must become more. And that was really hard for me, because as I was pulling out of that space, it almost felt like I was being lazy. You know what I mean? Like I would be on a call with somebody and like, well, they're out doing the work and I'm in the back not doing the work. Well, that's just wrong. And that's a struggle too, man. That's hard to wrap your brain around, the idea of not identifying yourself as the person bent over the table adjusting all day. And that's not the only value that you bring to a practice, into a business. And that's a hard transformation to go through as well when you transition from build to scale.
Great points. You underestimate what you can do. I remember Tony Robbins saying, we all overestimate what we can do in a year, and we underestimate what we can do in a decade. So what we do is we think these grandiose goals in 1 year, and we don't reach them. Then grandiose goals the second year, we don't reach them. Then we do it the third year, we don't reach them. Then it changes the psychology in your subconscious mind that you're not worthy or you can't. So instead, if we made shorter, accomplishing, bite off what we can chew, meet the goal, then you fool your subconscious mind thinking that you can fail. What a great trick to play in your mind, that when you set a goal, you're going to reach it every time. Then a decade later, you look back and you go, how the heck did I create this movement in my community of chiropractic, the prosperity for my family, the healing that's occurring? It's like you look back 10 years later, you're like, how did this happen, right? I mean, if you do it step by step, and I've been guilty of doing it in the 1 year goal being too large, and then then it kind of breaks you down a little. So those that are listening, really chunk down that goal, hit that first year goal, refine your behaviors, and then stretch the goal the next year. But it's all based on the change of behavior. There's two things I think, Bryne, that you made me think of when you were talking about this scale. One is ego. I've been doing this for 20 something years, and we help doctors. We get them to 30 grand, 40 grand, 50 grand. And then they do what you mentioned. You stop training for a while. It's like, I get this. I know this.
Yeah.
And they think that's the end of the road, but it would be like a baseball player that's in college ball throwing the ball. And then all of a sudden they get to the major leagues and they go, dude, I got this. I made it. I've been throwing since Little League. I could throw the ball to first base. I'm done with that practice. I mean, that would destroy his career, right? So you flipped it back in, and I see this happen in AlignLife. Either they regress when they stop, or they stagnate, and they just stay in ego, and they don't continue training it. And it's beyond me, those that just stop, because we have to stay in the basics. The fundamentals of chiropractic is the same thing as the fundamental of sports. But I appreciate you saying that you had that realization. If you could speak into that a little, that's awesome.
Yeah. So let me go back to that. So that point you just made about how, like, when, you start getting good at something or fluent in something, you stop doing it. And when you were talking about like goal setting, I can have vivid memories of, being, 2, 3, 4 years in practice and refusing to set goals, only because I was either, I was like, no, the practice is producing. Like, I'm not going to set silly goals that are, menial to me. Or more so, probably, what was true to me is that I didn't want to set goals to not reach the goals. So like this whole concept of like, underestimating what we can accomplish and overestimating, I think it's important too for, especially like students and young docs to just start thinking along those lines right now of goal setting and just being willing to get uncomfortable enough to set goals. And, you may hit them, you may not, but getting in that rhythm is something that I wasted years not doing. And it's not so much that, it feeds the competitive spirit to say, I'm going to reach this, goal and then hit it. But the practices, the procedures, the systems that you employ, and the mindset and thinking and training and planning around trying to execute, what you need to execute to reach that goal, that's where the juice is. That's where the win is. And it took me years to figure that out. So when we talk about like goal setting, it's not a financial goal to be able to hit a collections level, or something like, and maybe it is for you, but, listening on the call right now, but for me, the realization came within, it's all the steps once you set that goal that you have to put into place to try and reach that goal. That's where the win is. It's great if you hit the goal. If you don't, you're still refining, you're still building out, you're still planning, you're still taking time to empower your team and yourself to do what needs to happen to reach that goal. And that's where the win happens over years and decades. And I hope if you're listening to this call right now, I hope if that resonates with you, then start to put some of those goals into practice so that you can get those laps in.
I like that, Bryne, and I like that you said it's not, even if it's not financial. The finances come when you take care of people, you follow systems. The finances come, but making the goal more about where your growth is, your team, or hitting learning, training, and systems and process in order to deliver better care to patients, more efficiencies, more structure. I think that's awesome. The other point I said that ego gets in the way. The second thing I see is that people think just working harder. And that's actually counterproductive to work harder. Like you said it, like I was bored.
Yeah, are you talking to me? Right now.
You just work harder. And it's actually counterproductive to work harder. You have to work less. And it's so wild to hear, but you said you struggle with that. It's so interesting.
Yeah. If you get to a space where you're becoming resentful, if you're dreading going to that marketing event, if you're dreading coming to work, if you're dreading that patient interaction, if you're dreading whatever that piece may be, I would challenge you to say that you're working too hard, you're holding on too tight, and you don't have either systems or people in place to help you accomplish and reach your goals. You're trying to do too much. That's
such great advice, Bryne, because innately we just work harder. Like that's a humanistic action. So let's end with the dream practice. So you made a decision at some point. Listen, we either were busting at the seams, or you had a vision of more doctors, or something happened in your mind. It was some day where you said, you know what, I'm going to do this. Or you saw a piece of land, or something happened. Take us back to that, and then let's go into actually the cool little pieces of what you're building and what you see for your future.
Yeah, I'll just go right back to the conversation we were having a little bit ago about when I brought on an office manager. When Stacy started in our practice, it just skyrocketed. Like the growth just shot up. And I want to double back on it. That's an office manager, and that's not another doctor adjusting and seeing more patients. That's just a brilliant person who's brilliantly hardwired to be successful in that role and to execute things that I was trying to do on my own and be a doctor and run a business at the same time. So that was A1 step that was so pivotal to our ability to grow and scale. When we brought her in, then there started to exist a framework where we could bring on bigger and more bigger team. So we started to diversify the team out, and then had the ability to bring an associate on, and then bringing on Dr. Jason, our associate. That was another level of skyrocketed scale from there as well. So I talked about like how we grew and leveled and grew and leveled. I mean, we've been in a growth state for 3 years now, just from being able to serve more and have the capacity to build a team that can serve more. And then it just got to the point where physically, we were having constraints in our space, and we need to be able to do 2 new patient exams at the same time. Well, we only have 1 exam room, we only have 1 X-ray, and so figuring out what that new space would look like came through a lot of laps and struggles and ways of trying to maximize efficiency. And I mean, like we said, we walked through the new practice last week when you were down, and every single step in that place is intentional. Like I can visually go to each room and, in my brain, go to a specific instance of this worked perfectly and we cannot change this, or this was a hang up. This was, a bottleneck in our practice, other practice that we're going to have, a plan for. And I'm just excited to get into that space because every single room and the layout and the flow is so intentional from laps and struggles that we've had, for years now. So I think we were talking off the, before we started the podcast about, is it okay to, is it a good thing just to start with your dream practice? If you had all the resources you needed, could you just walk right into that practice, turn the key and have an amazing, beautiful practice? Maybe, but I would argue that it's the laps and it's the struggles and it's the challenges and then you identifying, efficiencies and flow changes that helps you be ready for that point so that you can understand, potential bottlenecks, but then anticipate them. Like that's the whole next level thing is you can start to see things, setting in, anticipate what's coming around the corner and what change needs to happen, 6 months from now, a year from now, to be able to be ready for that too.
Yeah, if you had all the money in the world and you built this practice that you're building right now, and you did it when you were getting out of school, you and I talked offline about it, and it's like you'd have to hire the staff to run this giant office. You'd have to know how to onboard them. You'd have to know how to train them, how to run KPIs, make sure they're assets. I mean, it's a lot to learn all that. So I think it's if you get into practice, guys and gals that are listening, or if you're a student, is just get into the opportunity. Make sure you're in the right system that matches your philosophy, matches your core values, innately feels like this is where I belong, and then build inside of wherever you are until you reach a point like Bryne did, where he felt a rub here, a resistance here, a conflict here, and then you start to see the vision of that next practice. So yeah, I think that's really, really good advice. So your practice is opening probably in the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks, right?
Yeah, 8 weeks. Yeah.
It's exciting.
It's so exciting. Yeah. And the patients are super stoked too. And that's what's been cool about this too is, patients say, oh, I'm excited for you guys. And I'll turn around and say, I'm excited for you. Like, we work hard and we serve hard with our patients in this space now. And I tell them that, this whole space is with them in mind. Like, how do we improve their experience even more so? So I'm excited for them to see it as much as I am for our team to exist inside of it too.
That's awesome. So closing thoughts, someone that's looking at whether they're existing in practice, we're trying to educate people in the AlignLife service, what we do, how we do it, and how we can serve those doctors at different levels, whether it be a student that's trying to just get out of the academic cycle right now and say, I need to find a place to work, finding them a job, or if they want to open a practice, or a doctor that just loves their work, loves their patients, but just is not dialed in with a system that's generating the prosperity or the impact to the community they want. Or the doctor that's ultra successful that wants to reproduce it, either build a large enterprise clinic, or another route is multiple clinics. What would be some general advice for someone that's looking at AlignLife?
Say yes. All those different situations that you bring up, all have their unique challenges and all have their unique genius that this person may be hardwired to accomplish, that state. But at the same time, if you've never been through those laps, or if you're hitting those bottleneck points, it's because there's a gap in your systems or your people or your training. And AlignLife is very good at identifying that and empowering you in that space. It's not a cookie cutter approach where every single office and every single doctor has to, be hardwired and practice in the exact same way. There's some people that are content seeing 200 people a week. There's some people that are content seeing 1,000 a week. And being able to just identify what your vision is and what you want to accomplish. AlignLife's fantastic at providing the tools to help you be successful, whatever you get to define success as. That's the best part, and a part that took me forever to identify is what was success to me, because all I wanted to do is grow and work harder, and then that flames out and you burn out in that situation. So whatever success looks like to the students or the docs on this call right now, AlignLife is well equipped to help you execute what that looks like, and be able to identify those gaps, be able to help train team members and people on your team to help you accomplish that vision and reach those goals faster, and not level out and not stay in that lull that I was in for years and years, because I pulled back thinking I could do it all on my own. You may be able to, but why? Why spend all that time and energy and struggle trying to figure it out on your own, or do it a way that you're trying to figure it out on the fly, as opposed to employing brilliant people who know what to do and how to help you execute it.
That's awesome. Great insight. And I appreciate talking about, their individuality, because we really made a change. We used to define success for doctors and be like, this is success. Then we decided we can't do that. So over the last 2 years, when we're talking with new doctors or students, we talk about helping them define their success. Like you mentioned, it's like, what is it? Can we help you build what you want? And it's odd conversation. Like, well, what do you mean what I want? I'm like, well, it's your vision. It's not mine. I used to tell you your vision, but I realized that's pretty silly. So now it's fun, because we get to sit down with a new doctor and like whiteboard out what they want and see their vision on paper. And of course it can change over a year or two.
It will change.
It will change, right? But to have that creativity to document it, be like, and let them feel their inspiration, it really is heartwarming to me to be able to get behind their authentic vision and be like, come on, just give it to me. Lay it out, and then we talk back to the team and say, can we deliver this? And it's like, yes or no. So it's such a new modified way that we're approaching. I really love it.
And that answer that I mentioned, it's obviously very myopic to, a specific practice and what that specific practice needs. But the other cool thing about AlignLife is it's fun to be on the journey with other like-minded docs. And it's really neat to, when I started, I was the brand new baby. And I remember that, docs that were been in the profession for decades and looking at these people like, there's no way I'm going to be able to get to their level. And then now, being 10 years in, being able to look at the young docs coming out of school and seeing the stages that they're at. And I can visually, I can remember being at those states and, people, mentors of mine like you and others, would future pace for me and say, all right, here's where you're at. Now here's what the next level is. And I couldn't believe that for myself, but there's no way I couldn't trust people telling me that. And the ability to be able to see those younger docs coming up and be able to do that same is so much fun too. It's one thing to be a doc and serving our patients and falling in love with their outcomes. It's a whole nother thing to be able to look back and figure out, and see the profession and the future of that profession and trying to help them reach their goals too is a whole nother thing. And that's the AlignLife culture is brilliant at identifying and helping docs individually, but also together to try and better the profession. And that's what I think you deserve a lot of recognition for building.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's the tribe that really inspires me. Is I always wanted to sit back and watch the brilliance of the room. And lately I've had that opportunity where we have our national convention, people are getting up speaking, and I'm taking notes. People inside of organization who are inspired, lit up on a vision, making great impact to their communities, and they're speaking at the convention that I put together. And I literally grabbed a pen and started writing notes because I'm like, this is brilliance. There is brilliance inside of this tribe. So I've really matured through that cycle like you did in practice. I've done in AlignLife when you said pull back yourself with your team and allow the brilliance and the genius of the team showcase themselves. I'm starting to do that even within the tribe. And it's hard to let go. Or is this going to go okay? Is everyone going to like it? Are they going to get mad that I'm not presenting? And people said, I got such great feedback when people inside, but it's the same journey, right? And maybe it's a journey in all professions and all walks of life. Maybe it's the journey in our personal relationship, our intimate relationships, or the journey with our children is that maybe we pull back a little, maybe we become better listeners or better. Maybe we're the Sherpa or the guide, but we may not be the chief and the dictator, right? So I think it's a lesson learned in our path of life, not just our path in practice, right?
Yeah. I think that's so true. Yeah, this doesn't have to be a chiropractic specific conversation. Anybody can listen to this and employ it and find leverage in this space.
Awesome. Well, we'll close up for today. That was really great conversation. Bryne, we'll have you on again talking about other topics on your journey, and looking forward to the launch of your new practice.
Thanks, brother. Looking forward to it too.
Thanks.
This episode was brought to you by AlignLife Chiropractic and Natural Health Centers. If you're interested in creating your dream practice or want to know more about AlignLife, go to AlignLifePodcast.com.